The unexpected war. It was a cold evening on Earth. The sky was dark, and rain slowly touched the streets. Jack, a quiet human man, walked home from work. He wore a long coat and carried a paper bag of food. He didn't talk much to people. He just worked, ate, and slept. His life was simple, lonely. But everything changed that night. Jack passed by the back of an old diner. He always used that path because it was quiet. There were trash bins and broken crates. But this time, he heard something different. A soft sound, like crying. Jack stopped. He looked around. Nothing. Then he heard it again. A quiet, sad voice. He followed the sound and found a small figure sitting behind the dumpster. She was shaking. Cold. Dirty. Her clothes were torn. Her eyes were large, too large, and glowing purple. Her skin was light blue. Her hair was silver and messy. She was not human. Jack's heart stopped. Was this a dream? The girl looked at him, scared but not angry. She didn't run. She didn't speak. Jack knelt down slowly. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. The girl stared at his face. Then, in a broken voice, she whispered, "Food, please." Jack felt something in his chest. She was just a child. Lost. Afraid. And starving. He reached into his bag and pulled out a warm sandwich. "Here," he said. "Take it." She looked at it like it was treasure. She took it carefully, her hands shaking. Then she ate fast. Too fast. Jack gave her his water bottle. She drank like she hadn't had water in days. Jack sat beside her, watching. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The girl didn't answer. She looked down. Tears ran down her blue cheeks. Jack knew something was wrong. Deeply wrong. He couldn't leave her here. "Come with me," Jack said. She looked up again. "Why?" Jack stood. "Because it's not safe here. And you need help." The girl slowly stood up. She was small and thin, maybe 8 or 9 years old. She wore strange shoes, broken and from another world. Jack gave her his coat. She wrapped it around herself. They walked together down the empty street. People looked, but no one said anything. Jack held her hand tightly. At his apartment, Jack gave her a towel and let her clean up. She looked around like she had never seen a house before. Jack asked, "What's your name?" She looked at him and blinked. "Name." "Yes, your name." She touched her chest, then her head. Then she whispered, "Don't remember." Jack sighed. "Okay, you can stay here tonight. We'll figure it out." The girl looked at the floor, then slowly walked to the couch and sat. She looked tired. So tired. Later that night, Jack gave her a blanket and a pillow. He turned off the lights and started to walk away. But the girl's voice stopped him. "Papa." Jack turned. "What?" She looked at him with those big purple eyes. "You, Papa now." Jack stood still. He didn't know what to say. The girl smiled, just a little, then closed her eyes. Jack stood there in the dark, confused and shaken. He had only given her food, a place to stay. But she had given him something else, something deep. Trust. Outside, far in the sky, a strange object moved fast across the clouds. It was not from Earth. And inside it, someone was watching Jack's home. A voice in a deep alien language said, "We found her. Prepare to recover the target." The girl was not just a lost child. She was something more. And the war that would change the galaxy had just begun. She doesn't belong to this world. Jack didn't sleep much that night. He sat in the old wooden chair beside the couch, watching the strange little girl wrapped in a blanket. Her silver hair glowed softly under the moonlight. She slept peacefully now, like she hadn't slept in weeks. But Jack's heart felt heavy. This was no ordinary child. She wasn't from Earth. He knew it. And he knew someone, or something, would come for her. The next morning, Jack made breakfast, simple eggs and toast. The girl sat at the table quietly, her big purple eyes scanning every corner of the room. She ate slowly this time, watching Jack. "You feel better?" he asked. She nodded. Then she said, "Warm, safe." Jack smiled a little. "That's good." He poured her a glass of juice. She sniffed it, then took a small sip. Her face lit up with joy. "Sweet," she whispered. "Like stars." Jack blinked. "Like stars." She nodded again and pointed to the window. "Home. Far, far, up." Jack froze. He put his fork down. "Where is your home?" The girl looked down. Her little hands gripped the cup tightly. "Gone," she whispered. "Fire. Boom. I ran, then fell." "Fell?" Jack asked. She pointed up again, then at herself. "Fell down here. Alone." Jack couldn't believe it. She really was from space, a child from another world. Lost, broken, and scared. He decided to do something. He needed help, but not the kind that wore suits and badges. No police. No government. He needed someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. Jack called his old friend, Dr. Lynn Carter, a kind woman who worked at a small medical clinic. She was one of the few people Jack trusted. "Lynn, I need a favor," Jack said. "Is it a dog again?" she joked. "No, this one is different. Can you meet me?" Later that day, Jack took the girl to Lynn's clinic. She wore a hoodie and sunglasses to hide her alien look. The streets were busy, but no one paid attention to them. Inside the clinic, Lynn greeted them with a smile. But when she saw the girl's glowing eyes, her smile disappeared. Jack pulled her aside and whispered, "She's not human, Lynn, but she's just a kid. I think she's hurt." Lynn nodded slowly. "All right, let's do this carefully." They ran tests, blood samples, body scans. The girl sat still and quiet, like she had done it before. Jack held her hand the whole time. After the scans, Lynn looked at the screen. Her eyes widened. This isn't possible," she whispered. "What?" Jack asked. "She has 2 hearts, and her cells are changing colors." Jack stepped back. "What does that mean?" "She's not just an alien. She's special. Her body is advanced, like it was made to survive anything." The girl turned to Jack and said softly, "They want me back." Jack frowned. "Who?" She shook her head. "Bad ones. They took my people. My mother said, 'Run. Hide. Never tell your name.'" Lynn looked at Jack. "You need to leave. Now." Jack picked up the girl and thanked Lynn. As they left the clinic, Jack noticed a black van across the street. 2 men in dark suits were watching them. His heart dropped. He walked faster. So did the men. Jack turned a corner and rushed into a back alley. The girl clung to him tightly. "Papa." "Scared," she whispered. "I won't let them take you," Jack said. Suddenly, the girl touched Jack's chest and closed her eyes. Everything stopped. Literally. The birds in the air froze. The wind stopped blowing. The sounds of the city vanished. Jack looked around. Nothing moved. The girl's eyes glowed bright blue. Time had stopped. Then, just like that, it started again. The girl collapsed in his arms. Jack held her tightly. What was that?" he asked. She didn't answer. She was asleep. He ran back home, carrying her clothes. That night, Jack placed her on the bed and sat beside her. He watched her sleep again, just like the first night. But this time, he wasn't just confused. He was afraid. Someone was coming. She was powerful, and the world wasn't ready, but neither was he. Outside, in a dark room far away, a group of masked beings watched her face on a screen. "She has awakened," one said. "Retrieve the child," another whispered, "before the humans learn who she really is." The hunt had begun. The men in black came for her. The night felt heavier than usual. Jack couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made him tense. He peeked through the curtains every few minutes, hand tight around a kitchen knife. The alien girl, still without a name, was fast asleep on the couch, breathing softly. She looked peaceful, but peace never lasts. Not when the whole universe is looking for her. At 3:27 a.m., Jack's phone buzzed. He grabbed it quickly. Unknown number. We know what you have. Open the door. Jack's heart froze. He turned off the lights, quietly walked to the front door. He didn't open it, but through the peephole, he saw two men in black suits standing outside. No badges, no expressions. One of them held a glowing device. It blinked red. They were scanning for something. Or someone. Jack backed away. Slowly. The girl suddenly sat up, eyes wide open. They're here, she whispered. Jack crouched beside her. We have to go. She nodded. Window. Fast. Jack grabbed a backpack, stuffed a few things. Food, water, cash. He picked her up and quietly opened the window in the back bedroom. Outside was the fire escape. They climbed out. Careful. Quiet. Behind them, the front door exploded. Boom. The two men in black stormed in. They moved like machines. Fast. Cold. No words. Only action. Jack and the girl rushed down the fire escape. He carried her in his arms as she trembled. He didn't ask why she was so scared. He already knew. They reached the alley. Suddenly, another black van pulled up. More men. Jack looked around. Nowhere to run. Then the girl did something strange. She jumped from his arms and stood between him and the agents. She raised her hand. The men stopped moving. Their faces changed. Fear. No, not fear. Confusion. The girl's voice echoed, though her lips didn't move. I am not yours. I belong to no one. A blast of white light shot out from her body. The agents flew back, hitting the van hard. Sparks flew. The van windows shattered. The lights flickered and died. The girl collapsed. Jack ran to her, lifted her up again. She was hot, burning hot. Her skin changed color again, deep blue, then purple, then pale. He rushed down the alley and disappeared into the shadows. They found shelter in an old subway tunnel. Abandoned. Wet. Cold. Jack wrapped the girl in his coat. She was awake now, but weak. Are they still coming? He asked. She nodded slowly. They always come. Why? Who are they? She looked up at him with glowing, tired eyes. They are collectors. They steal children like me. Sell us. Use us. Jack felt sick. You mean they take you like slaves? She nodded. I ran. My ship crashed. You found me. Jack's fists clenched. I won't let them take you. Suddenly, she reached into her torn clothes and pulled out something shiny. A small silver cube. What's this? Jack asked. She placed it in his palm. My memory, my truth, only works with heart. Jack didn't understand, but he kept it. I don't even know your name, he whispered. The girl closed her eyes. Then, slowly, she touched his forehead. Images filled Jack's mind. Her planet, her people. A happy life once full of light and music. Then fire. Screams. Ships attacking. Her mother handing her the cube and saying, Run, my star. Run to the blue world. He gasped and stepped back. You're royalty, Jack whispered. She nodded. I don't know what to do, Jack said. I'm just a man. You are more, she said. You chose kindness. Suddenly, a new sound echoed through the tunnel. Footsteps. A lot of them. Jack grabbed her and ran deeper into the dark tunnels. But he was tired. Hungry. Scared. I can't run forever, he said. The girl looked at him with a strange light in her eyes. You don't have to. Then she raised her hand again, and the tunnel wall in front of them opened like a door. Behind it was a hidden room, metallic, glowing blue. "What is this?" Jack asked. The girls stepped inside. A safe place, for now. The door closed behind them. The outside world vanished. Jack stood still. He was no longer just hiding a lost girl. He was part of something much, much bigger. Meanwhile, in a hidden base far above Earth, the collectors stood around a glowing map. One pointed at Earth. "She is awake." Another nodded. "She has bonded with the human." The father. "No, something stronger." They all looked at each other. "She has chosen him," one said. "Then, he must be eliminated. Her real name is not a name." The hidden room felt like another world. Its walls were smooth and glowing with a soft blue light. Strange symbols floated through the air, like dust, but alive. Jack stepped forward carefully, holding the girl's hand. She was weak, but her eyes were glowing again. Her energy pulsed with the light of the room. "This place, what is it?" Jack asked. The girl smiled faintly. "It remembers me." Jack looked around. There was no bed, no chairs, just a single stone in the center, shaped like a star. The girl slowly walked toward it. She placed her palm on the star. The room changed instantly. The walls lit up with stars, planets, moons. It was like standing inside a galaxy. Jack asked. Then a voice, soft, warm, and musical, filled the air. "Welcome back, daughter of Lumeria." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "Luma? What?" he asked. The girl turned to him. "Lumeria, my home." She looked around at the lights. They formed into images, moving like memories. A tall woman with silver eyes smiled at the girl in the vision. That was her mother. She was strong, kind, and beautiful. She wore a crown shaped like a crescent moon. "Your mother," Jack whispered. The girl nodded. She was Queen Mira of Lumeria. The image changed, ships falling from the sky, explosions, screaming, soldiers in black armor. The collectors. They came for us. For power. For me. "Why you?" Jack asked. The girl walked to him. "Because I hold the key of Lumeria." She opened her hand. The small silver cube she gave Jack before. Now it floated above her palm, spinning slowly. Jack stared at it. "You said this is your memory." "Yes, and more." She closed her eyes. Suddenly, the cube burst into light. The walls flashed. Symbols flew from the air and wrapped around her. Her body lifted slightly off the ground. Her skin shone like starlight. Jack stepped back, stunned. When she opened her eyes, her voice was not just hers. It was many voices together. "I am not a name. I am a star. I am a key. I am the last light of Lumeria." Then she collapsed. Jack caught her before she hit the ground. Hey, stay with me," he shouted, panicked. She opened her eyes slowly. Her glow faded. "I am okay, just tired." Jack held her tight. "I don't care who you are," he said softly. "You're still a child. You need rest." The girl looked at him for a long time. Then she smiled. "You still don't want to know my real name?" she asked. Jack shook his head. "I don't care if it's a name or a sound or a galaxy. I'll call you what you want." She tilted her head. "Can I choose?" "Of course," Jack said. She looked down, then said quietly, "Call me Star." Jack smiled. "Okay, Star." He liked that name. It fit her. They stayed in the hidden room for hours. Jack tried to sleep, but his mind wouldn't stop. He had learned too much. He wasn't just protecting a lost alien girl. He was guarding the last light of an entire world. And now she had a name. Star. Meanwhile, above Earth, inside the Collector's flagship, a tall being stood before a screen, watching the memory transmission from the cube. "Star has awakened," he said. Another figure, covered in dark armor, nodded. "And the key has chosen a human." "Strange choice," the leader said. The armored one replied, "Love is not logical." They turned to face their fleet. "Begin phase 2, the leader ordered. "We take the human alive. And the girl, dead or alive, we take the key." Back on Earth, Jack and Star were walking again. The hidden room had sealed behind them. They had no home now and no clear path forward. "Where are we going?" Star asked. Jack looked at the sky. "To someone who owes me a favor." They took a train far into the countryside, where the stars were brighter and the sky felt close. They reached a small cabin. Inside lived an old man, rough, quiet, but wise. Jack introduced him. "Star, this is Rex. He used to fly starships, a long time ago." Rex looked at Star and froze. He stepped forward, stared at her eyes, and whispered, "You're not supposed to be real." Star just smiled. "Will you help us?" Jack asked. Rex slowly nodded. "For her, yes. But be ready, Jack." "Ready for what?" Rex pointed at the sky. "For war. The hunter ships have landed." The cabin was small, quiet, and hidden deep in the forest. For a few days, it became a safe place. Star slept more peacefully. Jack chopped firewood and cooked simple meals. Rex, the old starship pilot, kept watch on the sky. He rarely spoke, but his eyes never stopped moving. He knew the quiet would not last. One evening, Star sat on the porch with Jack. She stared at the night sky, so full of stars it looked like a sea of diamonds. "I used to live up there," she whispered. Jack glanced at her. "Do you miss it?" Star nodded. "Yes, but I also feel safe with you." Jack smiled. "And I feel braver with you." Just then, a deep humming filled the air. Like a storm, but without wind. Rex rushed outside. He looked up and cursed. "They're here." Jack followed his eyes and froze. 3 dark ships moved across the sky, silent, triangular. No lights, no sound, just heavy shadows against the stars. The trees shook slightly as they passed overhead. Star grabbed Jack's hand. "They found me," she said. Rex pulled the dusty control panel from under the cabin floor. "What's that?" Jack asked. "Old tech," Rex replied. "Built it long ago. Can block scans. For a short time." He pressed a button. A soft wave of blue light spread over the cabin like a dome. "It won't stop them," Star said. "They'll send soldiers. Soon." Rex nodded. "That's why we prepare." Hours later, the forest was quiet, too quiet. Jack held a flashlight and walked the perimeter. He had never held a real weapon before, but now he carried one of Rex's old energy rifles. Star sat inside, drawing symbols in the air with her fingers. Glowing lights followed her hands. She was practicing, learning, growing. Suddenly, a sharp crack broke the silence. Jack turned. A figure moved between the trees, black armor, glowing red eyes. "Rex!" Jack shouted. But before he could react, 2 more soldiers appeared. They were fast, faster than any human. One leaped toward Jack. Star's scream echoed through the cabin. Jack pulled the trigger. A blue blast hit the soldier in the chest, but he kept coming. Then Star ran out barefoot, eyes glowing bright gold. She screamed, and the ground shook. The soldier froze midair, locked by invisible force. Star's voice thundered, "You do not touch him." She raised her hand, and the soldier flew backward, slamming into a tree so hard it cracked in half. Jack stared at her, speechless. "I didn't know you could do that," he whispered. Star's eyes dimmed. "I didn't either." Inside the cabin, Rex slammed his fist on the panel. "They've landed troops. I count 15, maybe more. We can't fight all of them," Jack shouted. "We're not going to. Rex replied. "We're going to run." "But where?" Jack asked. Rex opened a hidden trapdoor under the cabin. "A ship. My old one. Buried deep under us." Star tilted her head. "A starship." Rex grinned. "Barely flying. But yes. Underground tunnel." Moments later, Jack, Star, and Rex rushed through the narrow tunnel lit by flickering old lights. The air was thick with dust and memories. At the end of the tunnel sat an old, rusty ship, covered in vines and cobwebs. Its silver paint was faded. Symbols from forgotten times marked the sides. Rex brushed his hand over the hull. "Welcome back, old friend." Jack stared. "It can fly." Rex smirked. "Only one way to find out." He jumped into the cockpit and began tapping buttons. Star climbed in and sat beside Jack. The ship hummed. It remembered her. Above the forest, the hunters circled the cabin. Their leader, a tall creature in dark armor, raised his hand. "She is near," he growled. "I feel the key." He turned to his soldiers. "Burn the forest." Underground hangar. The ship powered up. Lights blinked. Engines hummed. Rex shouted, "Hold on." The tunnel behind them collapsed as the ship blasted upward through the dirt and trees. Boom! The old cabin exploded behind them. Jack looked through the window. Fire spread fast across the forest. Black ships fired beams into the trees. "They're destroying everything," he whispered. Star held his hand. "Because they fear what I am." "What are you?" Jack asked. She looked at him. "I am the last light of a dead world, and I will not run anymore." One man, one alien girl, and a fight for Earth. The stars stretched like ribbons across the window as the ship soared through hyperspace. Inside the cockpit, silence filled the air, except for the low hum of the engines. Jack sat beside Star, watching her rest. Her silver hair glowed softly under the ship's blue lights. Her breathing was steady now, but her hands still trembled in her sleep. She had pushed herself too hard. She had saved him again. Jack reached out and held her hand gently. "She's not just a child," he whispered. "She's a miracle." Rex stood at the control panel, his eyes locked on the map. "We'll reach the moon," she mentioned, "in a few hours," he said. "But there's something I didn't tell you." Jack turned. "What is it?" Rex sighed. "The moon isn't just ancient. It's protected, and guarded by machines older than Earth itself. If she's really the heir of Lumeria, the moon will recognize her. If not, we may not survive." Jack looked at Star. "She is Lumeria. I've seen it. She doesn't just carry power, she is power." Meanwhile, on Earth, the skies were no longer quiet. People in major cities looked up and pointed at strange black clouds. But these weren't clouds. They were ships, massive, silent, and dark. The collectors had arrived, and they were no longer hiding. One ship hovered over a desert in Nevada, another over Tokyo, a third one above Africa. The world governments were confused. No warnings, no messages, just shadows and fear. But the collectors had only one message to send. And it wasn't for the world. It was for her. Inside the ship, later, Star awoke with a start, her eyes wide, her hands glowing faintly. Jack leaned in. "You okay?" Star nodded slowly. "They're coming. Not just for me, but for Earth." Rex turned. "They've begun the invasion." Jack's face tightened. "How do we stop them?" Star looked down at her small hands. "Alone, I can't." She turned to Jack. "But with you, maybe I can." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Me? I'm just a man." "No," Star said. "You're more. The key chose you too." Rex looked confused. "Wait, the key bonded with him." Star nodded. "That's why I could stop time when I touched him. That's why I hear his thoughts sometimes. He's my anchor." Jack blinked. "Anchor?" Star smiled. "My balance. My guide. My papa." Jack looked at her for a long time. "Then let's stop running," he said. "Let's finish this." Arrival. The moon of Lumeria. The ship dropped out of hyperspace near a broken, lifeless moon floating in the dark. Its surface was cracked. Old metal towers stuck out of the rocks like the bones of giants. But in the center was a glowing temple, alive, breathing with energy. As they approached, the ship slowed. Rex's hands shook. "This place. It's full of old magic. I can feel it in my bones." The ship landed gently. Star stepped out first. The air shimmered around her. The temple lit up as she walked toward it. Lights followed her steps like waves. Inside the temple, a voice echoed through the stone. "Daughter of light, you have returned." Star stepped forward, holding Jack's hand. "You carry the key and the bond." Jack felt warmth flow through his chest. "You are the first human to be chosen." The floor opened. A pedestal rose with a crystal sphere on top. "To fight darkness, you must awaken the beacon." Star placed her hand on the sphere. Jack placed his hand on top of hers. A blast of light shot into the sky. It reached far, across galaxies, across Earth. It hit the collector ships like thunder. On Earth, the sky changed. A wave of light pushed back the collector ships. People saw it and cheered. In the collector mothership, alarms blared. "They've awakened the beacon," one soldier shouted. The commander roared, "Then we go there, to that moon, and we take them both." Back in the temple, Star collapsed to her knees. The light had drained her. Jack picked her up. But now, something had changed. A hidden chamber opened. Inside it stood an ancient armor, floating, silver, and glowing with blue light. It moved toward Jack. What is this?" he asked. Star smiled faintly. "Your gift, from Lumeria." Jack touched the armor, and it wrapped around him. His body glowed. He felt strength, speed, energy. "I don't believe it," Rex whispered. "He's becoming a Star Guardian." Jack turned to Star. "Let them come." Hours later, the final attack begins. Collector ships arrived in orbit. Troops poured down onto the moon. Jack stood outside the temple in the new armor. Star beside him, floating slightly above the ground, her hands glowing again. Rex manned the ship's weapons, ready to fire. The sky rumbled. And then, war began. Blasters, fire, explosions. Jack fought like a warrior from legends. Star bent light, and time itself, stopping soldiers mid-step, turning their weapons into dust. Together, they were unstoppable. But then, from the blackest ship, a giant stepped out, the collector commander. 10 feet tall, eyes like smoke, voice like thunder. He marched toward Star. "You are a child," he growled. "You cannot save this world." Jack stood in front of her. "She doesn't have to." He raised his arm. His suit lit up. "Because now, she's got me." She's not just his daughter. She's their last hope. The battlefield was silent for just 1 second. 1 breath. Then all chaos broke loose. The collector commander charged with the force of a falling star. Jack stood tall in his glowing Lumerian armor, body humming with alien energy. Star hovered behind him, her silver hair floating like a halo, her eyes shining brighter than any light in the sky. Rex, high above in the starship, shouted into the comlink, "Jack, he's charging a pulse bomb." "I see it," Jack shouted back, gripping the alien gauntlet on his arm. The commander raised a black sphere in his hand. It pulsed with dark energy. "I will erase your planet from time," he bellowed. Jack didn't wait. He ran forward. Fast, faster than human. He slammed into the commander's chest with all his strength. Metal met metal. Light met darkness. The ground cracked beneath them. The two giants wrestled in the dirt of the ancient moon, while Star closed her eyes and began to float higher. She was chanting now. Not in English. Not in any known language. But the moon heard her. The beacon inside the temple began to glow again, this time brighter than ever before. Deep in space, every collector ship froze. Their systems flickered, lights dimmed. Soldiers dropped their weapons. Some fell to their knees, covering their ears. The sound, no, the feeling of the beacon reached their minds. It was a song, a memory of light, a piece of a world they helped destroy, and now feared. Back on the surface, Jack was bleeding. Even with the armor, the commander was stronger, older, built for war. "You protect a child," the commander growled, throwing Jack into a wall of stone. "Why?" Jack wiped blood from his lips and stood again. "Because she's not just a child," he said. "She's a light, a second chance. And you are nothing but a man." Jack smiled. "Exactly." Then he leaped into the air, grabbed the commander's arm, and pulled the pulse bomb from his hand. With all his strength, Jack threw it into the sky. Star opened her eyes. She raised one hand. The pulse bomb exploded in the air, harmlessly, like a firework swallowed by the stars. The commander roared. Star floated gently back to the ground. "No more," she whispered. She looked at the sky and called out in the language of her people. From above, the temple opened once more. A crown of light floated down, gold and silver, shaped like a star itself. It hovered above Star's head. She did not cry. She did not run. She stood still, proud, strong. "I am Princess Star of Lumeria," she said loudly. Her voice echoed across the battlefield. "Daughter of Mira, keeper of the beacon, and I forgive you." The commander fell to his knees. He trembled, not from fear, but from something he had never felt before. Regret. One by one, the collector ships turned around, not because they lost a battle, but because they had no reason to fight anymore. They left, quietly, without another word. Later, the moon was calm again. Rex stood near the ship, amazed. "I thought I'd seen everything," he muttered. Jack and Star stood at the edge of a cliff, looking down at Earth glowing in the distance. Jack turned to her. "What happens now?" Star smiled. "I rebuild Lumeria, but I'll need help." Jack chuckled. "I can't fly ships or bend light." "You gave me food," she said. "You gave me a home, and you stood between me and the galaxy." She touched his chest. "You gave me something I never had." Jack looked at her. "A father." She nodded. He knelt down and held her tightly. "I'm proud of you, Star." She looked at the Earth again. "I want to protect it now, just like you protected me." 1 week later, Earth. World leaders stood confused. Their skies were clear. The alien ships had vanished, and on every screen, a message appeared in glowing letters. "Do not fear. The light has returned. She walks among you. Protect her, and she will protect you." Back at the cabin site, rebuilt, Star planted small glowing seeds in the soil, flowers from her home. Jack grilled vegetables nearby, smiling. Rex flew in every week with tools and parts. They weren't just building a house. They were building a new beginning. Final scene. At night, Star stood on the porch again. She looked up at the stars. One blinked brighter than the others. "Lumeria," she whispered. Jack stepped beside her. "You miss it." Star shook her head. "I'll go back one day. But tonight, this is home." Jack smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. She leaned her head against him, and for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy was quiet. Not because it had ended, but because it had healed.